Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems NATIFS virtual site visit. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jackie Blackbird. I'm a member of the Aani and Nakota community of, or tribe, of Montana, and my role at Newman's Own Foundation is the Indigenous Communities Officer. Our agenda for today, as we have natives share for us, I'm going to share a little bit about Newman's Own, the foundation. I'll introduce the speaker for natives, and then we'll continue with the site visit, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So to start us off, I wanted to share just a bit about the history. Newman's Own was founded in 1982 by Paul Newman, and not long after that, the Newman's Own Foundation was created to carry on Paul Newman's legacy. The mission of Newman's Own Foundation is to nourish and transform the lives of children who face adversity. And if you'd like to learn more about our work, please sign up for our newsletter and check out our website. I'll have one of my teammates post that link into the chat so that everybody can see that. So NATIFS has been Newman's Own Foundation grantee since 2021. And a fun fact was that the Sioux Chef, Sherman, visited the Newman's Own Foundation offices in Westport, Connecticut in 2022. And he was able to share about the Indigenous Foodways work with our Newman's Own staff. So I wanted to share that with everyone. I think that was a great opportunity for our employees to learn more about natives. And so now I will introduce Kate Hoff so that she can take some time to introduce herself the way she prefers, and we'll get started with the site visit. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Well, we're very, very excited to be here today and doing this site visit. My name is Kate Hoff. I do strategy and resource development here at NATIFS. And I've been working with Sean for now, it's like 7 years on getting his vision out and on paper and circulated and help get this organization up and running. And so it's been a very, very exciting time. And so we're very happy to share with you what we've been doing. Our Indigenous Food Lab and Market are in a public market space. So for the first part of the tour, so you can kind of see the space, and also the internet connection is a little bit sketchy up there. So we have recorded a short tour just so you have a picture of what the space is like. And in that video, you'll hear from a couple other staff members. And then that's just a short piece, and then we'll come back and we'll have Sean and Linda talk more in depth about the work. So thanks again for everyone for coming, and I think we can cue the video.
All right, give me just a moment here. Figuring out my tech, so please bear with me.
Hello, welcome to the Indigenous Food Lab, otherwise known as IFL, here at Midtown Global Market in Minneapolis. My name is Jo, and I'm happy to guide you through our installations today. The Indigenous Food Lab is a flagship program of the nonprofit North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, with our acronym NATIFS. Our mission is to reintegrate Native foods and Indigenous-focused education into tribal communities across North America, aiming for cultural and nutritional revitalization. What is the Indigenous Food Lab? The IFL Market in the Midtown Global Market is the first of its kind in Minneapolis, serving as a pilot project that will be replicated across North America to support Indigenous food access and enterprise development. The Indigenous Food Lab consists of a professional Indigenous kitchen, demonstration studio, spirit kitchen, and the Indigenous Food Lab market retail space. As we expand, future satellite Indigenous Food Labs will include these elements. For some historical context and our mission, we launched the Indigenous Food Lab in phases. Starting in summer 2020, our professional Indigenous kitchen prepared over 80,000 servings of culturally relevant soup for tribal elders throughout Minnesota. On June 1st, 2023, we opened the Indigenous Food Lab Market, Spirit Kitchen, and Demonstration Training Studio. Classes began in earnest in fall 2023. Our goal is to create multiple tribally operated kitchens that bring cultural and nutritional revitalization across North America.
Hi, my name is Ismael Boca Aguilar. I am the culinary leader at the Indigenous Food Lab. I supervise the production of the Indigenous Food Lab, as well as the well-being and the functionality of the market space and the Spirit Kitchen. Currently, we're working on a couple projects. We have a high production of tortillas. We're producing around 3,000 tortillas a week in only 2 days, because on top of that, we're also making bison stock, we're raising greens. We are making other foods that we are delivering to a one on a regular basis. We're also getting ready for the state fair, because we're gonna be serving some amazing indigenous food there for the first time. For the first time, the state fair is gonna have an indigenous vendor selling indigenous food. So we're really excited about that, and we're getting ready for it.
Hello, my name is Jason Garcia. I'm the general manager at the Indigenous Food Lab Market. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the sorts of things we do in our day-to-day here. First and foremost, we operate as a point for people to find indigenous food and indigenous food items. We carry over 90 different products, and we currently source from over 60 different indigenous providers. We source from as far north as Alaska and as far south as Ecuador, as far east as Maine, and as far west as Washington and Oregon. We're very excited to be able to offer a huge array of products from seafood, prairie meats, as well as packaged foods, drinks, and books to help people learn how to cook with all of the bounty that we are able to stock. In addition to our retail, we also have our Spirit Kitchen, which provides hot and ready-to-eat meals for people who stop in, particularly during lunch. We serve products from a variety of indigenous growers, as well as indigenous bison producers. We have an array of foods that are all created to be gluten-free, dairy-free, free of anything that is a colonial product such as chicken, beef, pork. We really focus on having healthy indigenous products. We do serve meat as well as vegetarian options, and we pride ourselves on being able to support people who have a large array of dietary restrictions. In addition to the retail and Spirit Kitchen, we also provide tours for people in the community or people who are visiting. We're something of a tourist destination where people can come in, check out the sorts of products we carry, maybe find out some things about indigenous people in their area and the sorts of products that they carry. So we are always trying to find new ways to connect with people across the country, to be able to ship products as far as we can, and to be able to educate people on what is viable in their area for them to purchase and carry to sustain and support other indigenous growers.
The Indigenous Food Lab collaborates with organizations like the USDA and Minnesota Department of Education to develop recipes and resources that utilize commodity products and regional foraged ingredients. We also assisted the Indigenous Peoples Task Force in packaging a line of baby food made from indigenous ingredients, demonstrating our commitment to reducing barriers to indigenous food sovereignty. Here at NATIFS, we prioritize education by sharing indigenous recipes with our staff and community, fostering an appreciation for the depth and diversity of indigenous cuisine. This includes revitalizing knowledge about indigenous plants and foraging through our resource and video library. Our approach encompasses not just North America, but the entirety of the Americas. We don't recognize colonial borders and take a broad view of indigenous, incorporating ingredients like dried chiles, chocolate, and quinoa, which are native to regions beyond North America. Our vision at NATIFS, long and short term, includes creating regional Indigenous food access by working with tribal communities to develop satellite Indigenous kitchens. Ultimately, we aim to replicate the Indigenous Food Lab centers across North America, promoting Indigenous food access and education on a broader scale. Thanks, everyone, for joining us in this virtual tour space. We hope you leave with a deeper appreciation for the rich heritage and ongoing vitality of Indigenous food systems. Please feel free to explore more of our offerings and support the Indigenous Food Lab in any way you can. Visit our site, natifs.org. We look forward to seeing the positive impact of our work spread across North America. Miigwech.
Excellent. Thank you to Joe and our team for putting that together and giving you a little bit of a glimpse of what happens inside the building. But now I'd like to introduce our founder and executive director, Chef Sherman, to talk a little bit more about the work.
Hamatakepe and Patuashte. My name is Sherman, and thanks for listening. This has been quite the journey for us to get to where we are right now today, and we feel like we're still just the very beginning at our journey also on top of that. So for me, I grew up on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. I'm enrolled with the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe. And I've been doing this work for quite a few years now, but it came from kind of a life's journey to get here. I started working in restaurants when I was a kid in the Black Hills of South Dakota at a very young age of 13. And I worked my way all through high school and college in a lot of touristy restaurants, and then eventually moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I didn't know much about Minneapolis except for that's where Prince came from. And I started another culinary, I wouldn't say another, I continued my culinary career there, and I moved my way up into a chef position, and I became a very young chef in the city in the late in the, you know, like around 2000. And I had a good chef career, but I started a few, I worked at quite a few different restaurants with lots of different techniques and cultures. But then a few years into that chef career, just realizing the absence of anything native out there. There was no Indigenous restaurants. There was not really any native cookbooks out there that really explained much. And it was kind of a hidden history. So I had to spend quite a few years just researching what that really meant to me. And, you know, just thinking about, like, is there room for the world for understanding what Native American foods are and Indigenous foods? So I started a long journey of trying to understand, starting with my own ancestry of what were my ancestors eating and what were they harvesting and what were they growing? Were they trading with other groups? What did we use for salts and fats and sugars? And just, you know, what was our pantry like? And trying to understand how we were surviving for millennia, basically, with the world around us. And as I learned more and more and started to piece together bits and pieces of information, I started researching about other groups and other tribes. And so it moved me from all over the place. I lived in Mexico for a while, studying some of the indigenous communities down there. I lived in Montana. I moved back to Minnesota eventually, and just really started focusing. But I started the career here in Minnesota. Back in 2014, I officially formed a for-profit company called the Sioux Chef, and I started working on the philosophy that I had created around Indigenous foods. And one of the best part about these Indigenous foods was the diet aspect of it, because the philosophy basically, in order to showcase Native American foods, I took away European foods that were introduced to us. So I removed things like dairy, wheat flour, cane sugar, beef, pork, chicken. And that might sound difficult to work with, but it's actually opened up a whole new world of things to play with. So we focus on prioritizing our purchasing around Indigenous producers first. We look for all sorts of Native American farmers growing things like corns and beans and squash and many different varietals. We use an immense amount of wild foods. We're using a lot of game meat, a lot of plants, a lot of trees, a lot of tubers, a lot of wild things like gingers and onions and garlics and flowers and all sorts of amazing stuff, and just trying to understand the regional aspect of Indigenous foods. The nonprofit really was born because I realized that just doing this food business in Minnesota as a for-profit was only going to reach a certain group of people, where this work needed to be out there everywhere. Because our main focus is North America, basically everywhere from Mexico through Alaska, but obviously we're here in the United States, so we're starting with where we happen to be. And we're just trying to showcase what's possible with North American indigenous foods. And so we have done quite a bit of work over the past decade, starting it really simply with just a food truck and a catering operation, launching the nonprofit with a vision to spread this work further and to actually just try and change the way things are and were when I grew up in South Dakota on the reservation, where I had very little access to food. We had one grocery store that serviced an area the size of Connecticut, which I know you guys are familiar with that state. And also just thinking about the health aspect, because I had to largely grow up in commodity food program foods, which is a lot of packaged foods, a lot of vegetables packed in sodiums, a lot of fruits packed in corn syrups, and literally just giving us gallons of corn syrup to eat and cook with, American, like government cheese and powdered milk and all these things. And there's a direct connection to some of the health epidemics that we have in tribal communities, especially amongst our youth, when it comes to just this style of food that's available to us. So we need to make some changes, and that's what this nonprofit is trying to do, is just become a support system. So we've really sectioned it out into just a few different pieces, but our main two pillars is really just creating access to indigenous foods and creating access to indigenous education. Because it's one thing to be able to hand somebody like a 5-pound bag of corn, but will they know how to cook with it at home? Will they know what to do with it? So that's why we created an education studio led by Linda Black Elk on our team, who is overseeing a lot of videos that we've been doing and a lot of chefs that we're bringing in to do more videos with us. But the idea is just to steward as much indigenous knowledge as possible and to create a video library to showcase all sorts of ways to play with these foods, to talk about these foods, and just basically just stewarding indigenous education in general. So the model that we built here in Minneapolis is something that we want to replicate. So we have the market space, which we brought in all of these amazing food producers with our focus on searching and finding indigenous producers first. We have the classroom studio to record all the videos and do as much classes as possible. We have our production kitchen where we're making a whole bunch of products. We've been playing with trying to become a micro to medium-sized co-packer to help get more products on the market. We just finished a product last year by doing an indigenous baby food, working with another local nonprofit where they grew out a bunch of indigenous heirloom seeds and things like indigenous squash called Getiokosamin, wild rice that they harvested, and we were able to package all of that into a beautiful product and give that back to them. I think there's a lot of value there to see more and more indigenous products get on the market, but there's a lot of hurdles too, because you can't just have a cottage industry business making some small things at home and then jump into trying to get into these markets, because typically when you're looking at co-packers, as you guys would know, you need a lot of money and a lot of product, and it's hard to bridge that gap. So we're hoping to do that. And we also have our restaurant, Awamni, which has been very popular, won Best New Restaurant in the United States by the James Beard Foundation, which is a top award for any restaurant, because that's a national award. And we just showcase what's possible by having a restaurant in our philosophy, again, with no dairy, no flour, no sugar, no beef, pork, chicken. So there's no sodas, there's no ranch dressing, there's no fried chicken, there's just a whole bunch of amazing products. And we're able to really do things differently with the restaurant, because we see the restaurant as an engine basically to help us with our programming. The restaurants is someplace that creates a job force, because we're able to maintain 100 employees at that one single restaurant throughout the entire year, and that job force grows to about 140 in the summer when we're busiest. That restaurant's doing about 6 million in sales, and a huge chunk of that is food cost, and a huge chunk of that food cost is going directly into the pockets of the indigenous producers that we're using, and it just becomes a really large voice for what we do. So this year we're already getting ready to move into Montana. So we've been working with Montana State University in Bozeman, and we have a space and location set up. So we're going to move right into creating more distribution points to move more foods directly into tribal communities. Where there's a classroom already built out. So we're going to be using that to share the education programming that we've created, and we're going to create more and more education between both locations. There's the production kitchen where we can create more products, and we're going to keep our eyes open of where we can place a restaurant to create the jobs, to move the food, and to be the voice. And behind Bozeman, we're looking at places where we planted seeds in places like Anchorage, Alaska, Honolulu, on Oahu in Hawaii, Rapid City, South Dakota, possibly Tulsa, Oklahoma, possibly pieces in California. We're looking at different areas in the East Coast that could be viable options for us to grow. But the goal is to just stamp out Indigenous Food Lab pinpoints all over the place to be regional support centers to create more Indigenous food businesses, to support more Indigenous chefs and culinary programs, to move and distribute more food, to create and steward more education, and just to be, again, just being a support center out there is our biggest goal. And, you know, we're doing it. We're moving, you know, as a nonprofit, we're doing our best to try and keep up with our growth and with ourselves. We get a lot of attention, but it's just important that we just keep moving, basically, because this work is really needed out there if we're going to change the way health works, because we've been able to popularize healthy foods without even calling it healthy, because it's just native, it's just Indigenous, and people are proud to see it. And we're happy to play our role of just seeing this happen more and more all across the nation. And I guess I can't remember what my time frame is here, but I think, how many minutes? Does anybody give me a timer? I didn't see it. Sorry, didn't watch when I started. But I wanted to introduce Linda Black Elk, who's been a really good friend of mine for a long time. She's a well-known ethnobotanist in the nation, and she's a wonderful person, and I'm really excited that she came on board with us to help, because we're doing something that's really big. We're doing something that's really needed. Education is a massive part of this work, and I'm just really excited to have her on board, and I'm happy to have her explain her perspective of what she's doing, and what she's sharing with her small team.
Thanks so much, Sean. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm so excited to just talk a little bit about what we're doing, about our education team. I'm Linda Black Elk. I'm the education lead here at NATIFS. I actually worked in Indigenous education at tribal colleges and universities for about 25 years before coming here to NATIFS. If you're not familiar with the tribal college system, it's basically a whole series of colleges and universities. 99.8% of them are located on reservations. There's one on Jackie's reservation, and they're wonderful, fully accredited institutions where they tend to be 2-year institutions, but we have many, many 4-year tribal colleges. We also, some tribal colleges even have masters, and I think there are 2 doctoral programs now at tribal colleges. And I'm so honored to have taught at them for a long time. And the only person and the only mission that could have got me to leave that was Sean and Sean's mission. So honored to be here at NATIFS with all of these amazing people. We do a lot of really great, important work here. You saw the video that Joe made, which actually featured a couple of videos that the education team has made. We focus a lot on making videos both for social media and our website, because it's a great way to reach young people. We make, you know, the quick social media type videos where we teach young people and whoever watches them how to identify plants, how to grow food in gardens, how to do small farming. I mean, NATIFS is doing all of that, but then we also teach how to then harvest plants sustainably, whether it is in the wild or from a garden, and then how to cook with them. And that's a big deal because accessibility isn't just about giving people food and making sure that they have access to the ingredients, right? We have to make this food taste good because, frankly, our palates, even most of us on this call, our palates have been colonized by salt and sugar. And so, one of our themes is to decolonize our palates so that we start to appreciate all of these big, beautiful, bold, amazing flavors that are a part of Indigenous foods. And then over time, we can make these foods more accessible flavor-wise for young people and adults. So that's a big goal of ours. That's a big goal of those videos. But we also focus a lot, as someone who I actually taught future teachers when I was teaching at tribal colleges. And so that's been a big mission of mine. So we're actually putting together an entire lesson plan database, a fully searchable listing of lesson plans that will be connected to the videos, that will be for use not just by K through 12 teachers, but by K through 16 teachers. So teachers even, you know, who are teaching at community colleges, tribal colleges, and beyond can utilize our lesson plans and our videos as well. The vast majority of them are either project-based or hands-on or both. And so that makes it so much easier. You know, we've even had a lot of homeschool programs contact us for lesson plans. And I'm really happy to say that we're able to provide lesson plans, recipes, and videos to go with them. Not only that, as if that all isn't enough for one education program for one Native nonprofit, we have started a meal kit program. And this is, in my opinion, unbelievably important because we're taking all of the recipes that we've developed that make many of them are traditional recipes going back through intergenerational knowledge for thousands and thousands of years. But we also have a lot of more like contemporary styled recipes, like Three Sisters chili, for example. And so we're able to take all of these beautiful recipes that we've developed, and we're putting both fresh and pantry type meal kits together. We already have a program that we've been running with 3 local schools, middle schools, because we feel like that's a great age to reach young people. But once a month, we go into these schools with a number of meal kits. They're sort of like those HelloFresh kits people were getting. They have everything a family of 4 or 5 needs, 4 or 5 needs to make a beautiful dinner that is all indigenous. So the Three Sisters chili, if you're not familiar with Three Sisters, that's corn, beans, and squash, which are part of a companion planting system for many indigenous cultures. We've turned that into a beautiful chili that's served with beautiful fresh corn tortillas. And we put a meal kit together so that families could make their own Three Sisters chili with fresh tortillas for their family. And so they take these kits home. The kids get so excited. They send us videos of them cooking with their families, or of them teaching their families about these unbelievable ingredients. Like, what kind of beans are these? Tell us about it. How, you know, we see kids middle school kids telling their parents about indigenous foods. And so one of the schools that we've gone into is called AIMS, American Indian Middle School. It's a Native charter school here in the Twin Cities. This is just an example. And, you know, we've been working with so many kids and their families there, taking these kits home every month. And, you know, you really start to see the changes in the kids and the families. Like, we have kids who come back and they've started giving us suggestions. Like, one kid said, you know, what would really be great is a taco kit, right? Because they want like indigenous taco night. And so this meal kit program is so beautiful, and we have so many hopes for it. And then we have some more advanced, like, dry pantry kits full of pantry staples, like bags of dried beans, bags of dried hominy, wild rice, and other pantry staples. And we add a number of recipe cards and videos. So we put little QR codes on each recipe so that not only are families able to take this beautiful pantry kit home, they're able to take a number of recipe cards that they can try, and they have access to videos seeing us cooking those recipes, right? So they're just, you know, I always feel like when we are learning, it's great to have those different learning styles represented. And it's been very important in the work that we're doing here at NATIFS. So yeah, I feel like we're going to change the world with those meal kits, frankly. But I did also want to say that we have been not just working with kids, not just working with their families, but we've also been working with teachers. We've had teachers from every one of the 11 reservations in Minnesota visit us at our lab, or we have gone to them on their home reservations to talk to them about how they can incorporate Indigenous foods, Indigenous food knowledge across the curriculum. So we've had teachers from mathematics classes coming to us and wanting to do something with foraged foods, for example. And so, you know, we give them lesson plan ideas for how they can incorporate traditional foraged foods into their math classes, right? There are ways, I won't go into it now, but it's been fun to come up with those lesson plans and help them be creative. So we've worked with every one of the 11 reservations in Minnesota, but we've worked beyond that as well. We've gone to larger school districts like the Anoka Hennepin School District, where we've worked with their American Indian programs and other programs like their entire sort of home economics program. It's not called that anymore, but that's, you know, it's a very large program in that school district, and we've been working with them. We've gone to school districts all over the state. We had the school of, there's actually a high school of environmental studies in Apple Valley, Minnesota, who has come here, and we've gone there to their school and made visits. We haven't just stayed in Minnesota working with kids, their families, and teachers either. We were recently up in Montana. As Sean was saying, we are opening up an Indigenous Food Lab in Montana, in Bozeman. We're so excited about that. And so we met with the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council, and they were so interested in what we're doing and how we can incorporate these ideas, these lessons, these concepts into reservation schools in Montana as well. So, you know, we'll be up on Jackie's home reservation actually in September, and heading up to northern Montana to work with, I think it's 5th through 8th graders, you know, working with Indigenous foods. You know, we have been invited over to Wisconsin. I mean, we've been invited all over the place. It's just a matter of us having the resources to get there, get into these schools, to get into these programs. You know, it's just a matter of getting there, because everyone is so hungry, literally and figuratively, for this food, for this knowledge, and for the amazing ideas that our education team and the market team and even our administrators are coming up with. I did also want to say that we're very, very fortunate. We've just started a very close relationship with the Farm to School Network. This is very important to me because I am an ethnobotanist, and I work in education here at NATIFS, but my husband and I are also farmers here in Minnesota. And now we're working with the Farm to School Network, and it is so promising, and I'm so excited about what we're going to be able to do. I have started to develop lessons. A lot of organic farmers here in Minnesota and Wisconsin and throughout the Midwest are very interested in how they can utilize what we would normally call weeds, right? Like the weeds that are growing in between our crops. They're very interested in how they can utilize those as a secondary crop, right? In everyday dishes. So things like purslane, lamb's quarters that are growing in farmers' fields are super delicious, super nutritious, and actually very important Indigenous foods in many cultures, including here in the Midwest. And so we're working with the Farm to School Network on some of those lessons and ideas. And that's just going to expand and be more. We've done, you know, all kinds of, I've really challenged our education team to do amazing things. We work with neurodivergent students on a regular basis. We work with the Minnesota Academy for the Blind, developing lessons that are very tactile and hands-on. And you know, some of my students are even learning you know, how to work with neurodivergent or students with differing abilities. And so it's just been such a gift and so fun. And I'm so happy to talk about it now, but I'm so happy to answer questions later too. Thank you all so much. I think Kate.
Yes, thank you, Linda, so much for that. Kate, if you want to jump in, I see we do have a bit more time. If Sean would like to share a bit more of the work, you know, the topics that Linda shared about, and then within, you know, 10 minutes, we can go into Q&A.
And I can talk more too.
Yeah, I was going to say, Linda has no shortage of things to talk about. She was just trying to be mindful. This is an unusual situation where we're encouraging both of these people to talk more. So, so yes, and I see a bunch of different questions popping up too, but I don't know how much time we want to get into that or how much more there will be. But Sean, if you've got any other comments to add on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was watching some of the questions, so I know we'll get to that in a moment and talk through that. But, you know, we're just building out a really strong team, and we're just trying to figure out these next steps as we try to grow outside of ourselves to create an extension in Montana and the lessons that we're going to learn about doing that. But really, we're just like, there's still a lot of needs out there, especially in the tribal communities. One of the things that we've been working on with the market, we've created a shelving unit that we're calling our NCAP program, where we're just we're able to find some grant funding to create a bunch of these shelving units and just fill them up with native products, but get them directly into the tribal communities, especially like places where some of their only food access might be a convenience store for 40 miles around them, where they just really have nothing to choose from because you just can't eat healthy out of one convenience store, you know. And so we just really wanted to be able to get this food products out there, and because we're doing this all through the nonprofit at the moment, we're able to supplement and create some creative discount programs. And if there's food relief in situations that arise out there, then we're going to have these distribution points to move things. And one of the things we've been playing with Linda's team is thinking about creating education and pantry boxes that can get distributed out there, that people can open them up and there'll be a whole bunch of products and education and links, QR codes to zoom into to find videos on what to do with all these products and recipes to play with. And I just think there's so much opportunity for education around foodways. And it's really just trying to normalize seeing Indigenous foods out there. Another piece that we've been working on is a lot of institutional style cooking, because that can really help move a lot of native food product, but at the same time, really get to a lot of kids out there, especially when it comes to school systems. We've been working with a school on Pine Ridge, South Dakota, where I grew up, and helping them to develop healthy recipes every month. We've been feeding them about 5 recipes, knowing that a lot of their food products are coming from non-native sources, but encouraging them to start implementing native food products into their recipes to make sure that some of their money is going towards Indigenous food producers, and also just showing them how to scale up so you can create these recipes that kids will like, that can feed, you know, 500 kids, 1,500 kids, 5,000 kids, whatever it might be. Working with school systems and universities to do the same with their culinary programs and places out there, but also looking at any other places where institutional style cooking is needed. A lot of IHS buildings, which are the Indian Health Services, and some of the hospitals that are out there servicing a lot of Native communities. Penitentiaries where there's like unfortunately a lot of Native peoples in some of those, in places like the Dakotas and stuff like that. And we're just trying to showcase like how we can start to normalize. So we're not just celebrating Native food on something like Thanksgiving, but it's something that we just see throughout the year, and showcasing with the restaurant what's possible, because, you know, I just want the next generation, when they go out to eat, to think about like, do I want pizza? Do I want Chinese? Do I want Native? And we just want to be on the list. You know, we just want to be on the list, because even right now, we were just talking yesterday, and when I was setting up the restaurant on Facebook, there was no category for Native American food. So I had to be like, I guess we're New American and Indian. I don't know. Like, there's just like not even a category for us out there. most of the time. So it's important to normalize the food. It's important for us to create these distribution points that don't exist. It's important for us to talk about the histories, especially the really difficult colonial histories that we went through with the loss of our land spaces, the loss of our cultures through boarding schools and residential schools. And just what we can do to start bringing it back. And there's a lot of positivity around bringing Native foods to peoples, both Native and non-Native, and creating that access and creating that education and just spreading it out there, you know. So it's a big vision, but what we're doing, the model we built is working, and we're just excited to find more support to be able to grow further and further, to eventually that we can cross all over North America, crossing colonial borders, being up in Canada, being down in Mexico, but just supporting Indigenous peoples all over the place, even globally, eventually down the road.
Can I say a quick word about food as medicine? Do we have a moment for that? Because it's something that I didn't say that is a huge focus of ours as well. We are it's very important to us to teach people how to incorporate medicinal plants into our meals every day. And that might sound strange to some because we've been taught that medicine is dangerous and you need a doctor to prescribe it. But if we really think about it, you know, onions are medicinal, right? We think of them as a culinary ingredient, but onions actually, you know, you can look up the research, and I think many of you probably know, onions help to lower blood pressure. They help to stabilize blood sugar. They're very good for the lungs. They can help with congestion. And so we really try to add medicine to our diet very intentionally, and we try to teach people how to do that. Now, you know, I think we've all heard the term food desert before. I've really been trying to get away from that term because, as some of you probably know, deserts are amazing, diverse, incredible places that have sustained populations for millennia, right? But we don't just live in what we're now calling food deserts. Although we're sort of trying to popularize the term food junkyard, right? That sounds more accurate. But we don't just live in these food junkyards. We live in culinary junkyards, culinary deserts, where we've forgotten how to cook, right? And so it's not enough to just make these ingredients accessible. It's not enough to make them taste good. We have to make sure people know how to cook them. And cooking with Indigenous ingredients, there are some different techniques that we need to teach to people and reteach. So for instance, how to process corn properly so that all of the nutrients in the corn become bioavailable. I hate being a little graphic here, but I will say that when you eat corn on the cob, you know that you do not digest it all, okay? But the thing is Indigenous people, as the first scientists of this land, came up with an amazing process that's now known as nixtamalization. That's a Nahuatl word from Central America, where corn came from. And when you boil corn in wood ash or another alkaline substance, you're able to break down the seed coat and make all of the nutrients in the corn bioavailable. And so it's fantastic. You can properly digest the whole thing. And so we have to educate on all of this, right? It's not just about, you know, handing someone a recipe and saying, here you go. It's about making sure that knowledge is carried forward, and that it's sustainable, that they can sustain it, hold on to it, and teach it to others. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you so much, Sean and Linda, just adding, you know, that much more knowledge for those attending this webinar and for those that'll be watching afterwards, because we are recording. So with that, we'll get into the question and answer. The first question that I have been tracking is from Sandra, and she wants to know, to the NATIFS team, have you worked with or procured any products from the Seneca Nation?
I was just actually with the Ganadagan just a couple of weeks ago in just outside of Rochester, New York. They have the Iroquois White Corn Project up there, and we've been communicating, but they're very interested in some of the support that we can give them of helping them to develop recipes and menus, but also working to supply some of their products into our distribution networks that we're creating and starting to move a lot of that product up there. And by creating a pinpoint out in that region, being able to connect with more growers, more suppliers, more people. So I think that was just timing that I was able to be out there just recently and working with some of the native chefs just north of the border there up in Toronto and that area. And there's a lot of products and just trying to figure out how to move some things around a little bit. And one of my favorite corn growers, Stephen McComber, is up in that region. He's got some amazing stuff and amazing education around a lot of the growth going in that region. So I think obviously for me, I'm excited about all areas of North America. My new cookbook comes out next year, and it's Turtle Island, so it's all of North America from Mexico through Alaska, and showcasing all this amazing regional diversity. And every area of North America is exciting, and we want to tap into every region to help develop more support and move more food around from basically everywhere.
I can't
Great.
remember who we get spice bush berries from, but I believe it's actually a member of the Seneca Nation up in New York. So
Yeah, and blueberries. I think we have a blueberry provider up there too.
Yummy. Those both sound really, really good. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the next question, which comes from Karen. She wanted to know if she happened to be in the Minneapolis area, could she visit the food lab and get a tour?
Yeah, we're open to the public, of course. And if they reach out ahead of time, we're happy to show people around and the restaurant's there. And, you know, the restaurant's been sold out since we opened, but that's not a bad problem to have for a restaurant. But we're always happy to help find some spaces in that space there too.
yep, our education team loves to give tours. So if you let us know ahead of time, even if it's a larger group, like if you wanted to bring some friends, we would be so happy to have you.
Yeah, if you have the opportunity to do that, I encourage you to. I was able to visit in April, and it was an amazing experience with really great food. And yep, NATIFS does a great job hosting people. Okay, so on to the third question from Samantha. How can non-native people be good allies in supporting the success and growth of Indigenous foodways?
I would say that obviously we're just doing what we can, but you know, sharing any information people might have about some native growers or producers or people in the restaurant industry trying to develop young chefs, whatever they might be, and you know, they can connect them with us. And we're also just looking for lots of support as a nonprofit because we have a big vision and we need to grow in many different regions, and it's going to take a lot of support. So helping us find some of that support is always something I'm always looking forward to. But I just think, you know, just looking for any entrepreneurs that are out there doing this work and just supporting them and helping raise awareness to the importance of their work and to the products that they're utilizing. So I just think that there's many ways for people to support out there.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Sean. The next question comes from Alex. She asks, how do we get all this amazing food into all tribal and public schools?
Well, again, helping us spread out this network because we're just trying to create a support network that doesn't exist, you know, and that's one of these biggest things. And we just want to be a support system for schools to be able to send some of their culinary leaders to in the off seasons, like in the summer, we can be training native chefs that are cooking in school systems and helping them work on recipes and menu development and building that toolkit that people can use all over the nation. And we're going to be continuously put out more and more education on a lot of those pieces too. So there's just a lot of, I mean, there's a a lot of work to do and there's a lot of need out there. We just had a group of high school kids from one of our tribal communities called Red Lake Nation, which is way north, visiting our food lab this morning, and we were able to talk with them directly. And we got a lot of good feedback of them, of listening to our stories and listening to how they can play a big role in this, and we just want to create things where a lot of these kids get excited about doing something, finding next steps, and helping them get rid of hurdles, because a lot of them grew up like I did myself, where we didn't have money around us and we didn't have a lot of opportunities, and we just had to slowly figure it out. And we want to help skip past some of those hurdles and show them the opportunities and show them the support they needed and the resources just to get out there and do it, and just help them find a passion to help out our communities everywhere.
And if you get a chance, I think that there's some videos on our site about the Red Cloud School project on Sean's home reservation of the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where, as he said, we are developing all Indigenous school lunch recipes for that school. So they have a number of school lunches every week, I believe, that are completely Indigenous, and they're even taking their own students out to forage and to garden, and then they're incorporating those foraged and gardened ingredients into their school lunches. When I think about what I ate in my school lunches, I just think it's so amazing that they're doing that. And so, yeah, it's a long process. It takes time, it takes education, but we're doing it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, because as we all do the work across Indian country, we definitely see that need, this educational need in the food space. So Karen has another question, and Linda, you answered this a bit when you talked about the school in Minneapolis, Ames, I believe. She asks, are you currently working in school districts? And we just talked about Red Cloud. And in particular, are you preparing NSLP claimable meals of an Indigenous nature?
Good, Linda.
We are working with so many different school districts. I feel like I did answer that in my talk. We, like I said, have worked with and on every reservation, all 11 reservations in Minnesota in some way, but reservations and school district elsewhere, Anoka Hennepin, we are Red Cloud, the Red Cloud School District on Pine Ridge, Richfield School District here, the Ames Middle School American Indian, it's a charter school, American Indian Middle School, Anderson School right here in downtown Minneapolis, but we're working with Minneapolis public schools as well. And like one thing that they're interested in, they're already doing one Hmong themed lunch per month, because we have a huge Hmong population here in Minneapolis, and they do one Somali meal per month. And it's so amazing, you guys, to see how like the Somali students light up when they get their lunch, and it's food that they recognize. And then their friends who are not Somali are asking them about the food, and they're teaching, and they're, talking to each other, and they're having a great time. And now we're going to be providing recipes to them so that they can start incorporating one Indigenous meal into the Minneapolis school district per month. So yeah, we're working almost every single school lunch recipe that we come up with is USDA approved. So, we try to stick within those guidelines.
Yeah, and we've been working with USDA a lot the past couple of years. We've been making lots of videos from different regions to showcase some of the different food possibilities out there. And we've just been having big conversations with them about some of the foods that are in their commodity food program and how they could think about trying to implement more regional Indigenous foods into that system eventually. But really, we just independently as who we are, we're just trying to build that toolkit that we can share with school systems everywhere that they can tap into. And we just want to build a huge library of institutional style culinary recipes for people to get into, so they can plug that into their costing efforts of whatever they need to be, knowing that some of those school recipes need to be as low as $1.75 per person sometimes, so we want to be able to just do what we can, but really push a lot of the effort, at least a lot of the opportunity of at least having one Indigenous a piece of food in their recipes. So some of that money that they're spending is going to some indigenous producers somewhere and supporting that economic development, because it's, you know, it's one thing to make native food, but if you're just using everything from an Aramark or a Cisco, then it doesn't really do that much that much good, you know. So we want to be really intentional about getting people to think about the products that they're using and where it's coming from.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we have time for a few more questions. I have about 3 or 4 left. We'll see if we get time to answer all of them. We have a question from Kashava. What are you doing to mitigate the chemicals in the water? Also, do you have a remedy for microplastics? Actually, this is probably a multi-part question. Do you have testing equipment to monitor nutrient levels in foods? Is eminent domain a concern for your group?
Those are a lot of questions. And obviously, because the very recent history of what happened to us as Indigenous peoples in the US, we've been through a lot of loss of land spaces, first off, you know, because as Lakota, we were still battling the US government till the turn of the century. And, you know, so this is very recent. This is very recent change of events for our culture. Because for me, when I started doing a lot of research, it was just my great grandfather's era that started to lose so much, you know, and just trying to be really cautious about what we're putting into our food. And, you know, like we at Awamni, we use rainwater for all of our grain water systems in the buildings. So that helps out a little bit. But we try to be as conscious as possible, you know, as much as we can. We do have some testing equipment, but mostly we're hoping that we can start to partner with more universities to really start pushing some of that research and partnering with some of that research with different groups around the country so that we can learn more, because there's not a lot of documentation about the wild foods that we utilize on a daily basis that are out there, you know, and we need and want to get a lot of that data so we can share it with other people. So there's a massive opportunity to showcase all of this ethnobotanical data that we could be finding out by just playing with these recipes, creating these recipes, and working with people to break down some of those needs, you know. And of course, as Indigenous communities, we're very deeply tied to water, and we're very concerned about water, of course, because we're going through water crisis in so many areas, and we just really want to be very careful and cautious with how water is utilized and protected. As in Minnesota, we've got nearly 15,000 lakes, freshwater lakes, and you know that's really precious. But because we're seeing water crisis and climate change happening, things are going to be affected, and we're going to have to learn how to develop and grow with the changes, basically, you know, because we tapped maple 7 weeks early this year in our area, and that's not a good sign, you know. But we have to be adaptable. We have to be very careful, and we should be finding people to help us lobby to create better protections around environment, you know, and that's part of food sovereignty, is protecting our environment so we can utilize it for food. So there's a lot of work to do around that, and all we can do is just continue to be intentional and cautious moving forward.
I think that we could have a whole separate webinar about how things got this way, right? Although we probably know many of the answers to that already. But I do want to say something that I think is super important. Sean and I are the same age. I won't say what that is, but we're the same age. And within our lifetimes, it was illegal for Native Americans to harvest and eat their traditional foods. Now I'm going to repeat that. Within our lifetimes, it was illegal for Native people to go out foraging, to go out hunting, to harvest traditional medicines, to harvest traditional foods. It wasn't until 1978 with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act that Native people were given the right to harvest their own foods and to actually go into their own ceremonies and practice their own spirituality. It wasn't until 1978. So when like Sean was saying, it has been incredibly recent that, you know, a lot of this stuff has been happening. So I wanted to say that first of all. And then I want to say that one of the things that I really love about working, because I've worked for educational institutions in the past, but one of the things I really love working about working for a Native nonprofit, working with Sean, working in food sovereignty, is that I don't really have to separate my activism from my everyday work. I lived in the camps fighting the Dakota Access Pipeline on the Standing Rock Reservation, fighting for my children's water supply. And that's been very important to us. I am also trained as a Western scientist. I am trained in biology. And so, of course, heavy metal uptake by plants is a very important issue to me. One of our favorite foods is cattails. I think almost everyone on here probably knows what a cattail looks like. They kind of look like those plants that grow in a swamp and look like a corn dog. Those are used in phytoremediation because they're so good at taking heavy metals up into their root systems. And so that's a justice issue when Native people are trying to reclaim their traditional foods, but they can't even eat their traditional foods because they're so contaminated by heavy metals. That's an issue. And so NATIFS does work to, we are going to be partnering with the University of Minnesota, North Dakota State University in analyzing a lot of traditional foods, plants, and looking at heavy metal accumulation, but also issues with herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, things like that. I think it's an important, your questions are super important. They're just huge. And we are one Native nonprofit, but we're lucky that we get to partner with other institutions as well.
Thank you for that, Linda and Sean. I just wanted to end with one more question. We're in our final minute, which I think is great. We used all the time. But from Bruce, he has a question for Sean. How does a non-chef from the East Coast begin to break the addiction to colonial foods and bring more indigenous foods into their diet? That's a good question to end on.
Well, I think first off, just learning what's around you, like learning the history of the land you're standing on and what really happened to the indigenous communities, number one, is a good step. But also just taking the time to learn the plant world around you, because our Western education system has completely ignored that particular piece. And I think just like starting off in your backyard, identifying the plants, and you're going to learn that most of those plants are going to be food, medicine, crafting, like there's all sorts of purposes for the world around us. And that education is such an important piece to it all. And then searching for people who are really connected to helping to bring back a lot of the native species in the different regions of where we might be. And if you're in the Northeast, then finding people who are working really hard to kind of re-indigenize the land spaces with a lot of plants and things that are supposed to be there, and, just keeping our eyes open. So like if you get our first cookbook, then you can just kind of see the philosophy of how we're approaching utilizing some of these wild plants and putting them into our foods and implementing them into things. And it's a fun journey, just to learn what's growing around you, to identify trees, to identify the plants, and to bring them into your households and learn how to use them. So there's a lot of ways to start that journey.
Well, with that, I would like to say thank you so much to Sean, Linda, Kate, and Joe, the NATIFS team, and for everyone that pulled this all together for this great virtual site visit and learning opportunity. And would just like to say thank you to the Newman's Own Foundation team too, that all came together. Thanks, team, for making this happen. And we wish everybody a good rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.